Part 3. Cradle of Moss. The Depth of Sanctuary. Chapter 1. The Sanctuary of Deep Green and Ancient Contracts. The passage from the sun-drenched, ordered view of Alara's window to the deep, silent realm beneath the forest canopy was a descent into the profound and the archaic. It was a conscious withdrawal from the clarity of vision into the complexity of the hidden world. The terrain beneath their feet immediately announced this change of state. The earth is padded softly green and deep, a complex, millennia-old tapestry, woven from decayed cedar needles, rich humus, and an astonishing variety of vibrant emerald mosses. This organic cushioning absorbed sound, ensuring that any footfall was muted, teaching patience and stealth. This softness was the mountain's ultimate generosity, a necessary buffer against the raw, uncompromising hardness of the rock and ice that lay higher up. Beneath this verdant canopy, the foundational reality of the forest persisted, where roots are anchored and the cold springs feed the roots, gnarled, thick, and powerful, were the physical embodiment of continuity, steadfastly grounding the colossal trees against the frequent, furious alpine winds. They drew their sustaining life, not from the turbulent, volatile surface water, but from the deep, pure wellsprings, the same frigid, pristine water that silently birthed the river she had studied in the valley below. This deep connection to the source was the forest's primary lesson, that true, enduring strength is always found in the unseen, deeply set foundations of being. The forest itself functioned as a vast nonlinear archive. The ancient secrets that the forests keep were not recorded in any human language, but were etched into the very DNA of the ecosystem. The precise symbiotic relationship between fungi and root, the slow, immutable laws of carbon cycling, decay, and violent rebirth, these primordial truths are buried close within the growing seed. The omniscient narrator understood that the most crucial lessons were not contained in the giant established trees, but in the minuscule potent promise held within the next generation, waiting patiently for its singular moment of light. This place was teaching Alara that the answers she sought for her grand quest were not abstract philosophical concepts, but tangible ecological truths about survival, patience, and the necessity of cyclical transformation. The forest held an ancient contract with the land, a pact of endurance that Alara sought to inherit. Chapter 2. The Music of Inner Stillness, an Ancestral Embrace. As Alara settled onto a cushion of moss, the music of her internal world shifted entirely, moving from the geometric hope of the window to the fluid encompassing sound of introspection. The harp begins a delicate cascade. The notes were not struck with force, but seemed to detach and fall with the lightness and purity of water falling onto velvet ground, each tone separate, yet merging into a continuous, soothing flow. This was auditory balm, a gentle, comforting, unhurried shade cast over her agitated mind. Within this resonant, protective space her anxious thoughts dissolved, leaving a singular restorative emptiness. It was a profound pause, where not a single troubling thought is found. The anxiety of the ascent, the fear of the unknown, the crippling weight of the self-imposed mission, all were momentarily suspended by the harp's perfect, tranquil, and non-judgmental harmony. To ground this ethereal, shimmering sound, the viola holds a tone both soft and low. It was the instrument of the hearth, of deep wood and warm resonance, providing an essential stability to the harp's lightness. The viola's sound was a deep embrace that stills the passing air, wrapping the space in a resonant cocoon of protective energy. It spoke a language of deep, ancestral, unconditional acceptance, suggesting shelter where the wild things grow. This was not the artificial sanctuary of civilization, but the fierce, natural protection afforded to all creatures that exist outside the human order, a place where vulnerability was allowed because it was understood as the prelude to necessary strength. The viola's low, rumbling resonance spoke specifically of respite found within the hidden lair, a natural, psychic refuge from the constant scrutiny and judgment of the external world. This specific forest glade, softened by the dense carpet of moss and shadowed by the heavy filtering canopy, was that lair. It was a space defined as the place where Alara would hide, a necessary retreat taken not out of fear or weakness, but to gather her fragmented spiritual and emotional energies. It was always beside the rock where time was set aside, a massive glacial boulder, scarred and moss-covered, that seemed impervious to the passage of days, lending its inert permanence to her transient ambition. This was the spiritual laboratory where young ambition could be put to test, tested against the absolute, unchanging silence of the ancient rock before being tested against the dynamic, violent challenges of the mountain face itself. The viola's sustained tone, the narrator realized, was the sound of her lineage speaking. Rest, but prepare. Chapter 3. The final test of solitude and integration. The environment here was intensely tactile and demanded full sensory engagement. The air is cool beneath the canopy, filtering the fierce alpine sun into soft, dappled coins of light. This coolness was a clarity, a form of spiritual sobriety, essential for the monumental task of self-examination that lay ahead. The silence was not the absence of sound. It was full of presence, containing a silent promise whispered to the soul. This was the commitment the earth made to those who approached it with genuine reverence, the promise of foundational support, of unclouded clarity, and of ultimate grounding. Ilara knew she needed this last moment of profound centering peace before the heart climbed to reality. The literal ascent up the mountain face was not merely a physical challenge of muscle and endurance, it was an unavoidable psychological and spiritual reckoning. The narrator knew that this journey, though outwardly defined by physical effort, was the necessary agonizing process before the broken pieces make her whole. Her current self was a complex mosaic of potential and fracture, the ambitious dreamer, the meticulous student, the hesitant young woman, and only the intense purifying furnace of the climb would fuse these broken, disparate aspects into the integrated, resilient, and unified hero she was meant to become. The absolute quiet of the mossy cradle allowed her the clarity to acknowledge her fragmented state before setting off on the journey to mend it. Her gaze drifted downwards, examining the slow, invisible work of the forest floor. The fibers weave around the resting stone, the mosses, lichens, and fine root systems binding the soil with immense, slow-motion strength, creating a cohesive web of protective life. This natural architecture was protecting all the fragile things that start, the seedlings, the dormant spores, the delicate fungi, the entire biological pyramid's base. It was a visible lesson in strength through collective support, but it also emphasized a profound paradox for her own singular journey. Within this sheltered collective, surrounded by the interdependence of the ecosystem, Elara faced her final, defining truth of solitude. It's here. The hero knows. She walks alone the quest. However, supported by the passive wisdom of the environment, and the deep tones of the viola, was hers and hers alone. She could take no companion, no external validation, and share no burden. The ascent required absolute, terrifying self-reliance, yet the solitude was not barren or empty. She carried an immense non-physical inner resource, but carried strength embedded in her heart. This strength was the culmination of all the silent lessons absorbed from the river's flow, the map's clarity, and the music's deep embrace, a profound non-physical power rooted deep within the core of her newly resolved being. Chapter 4. The Final Blessing and the End of Innocence. As the cool shade deepened into the heavy stillness of the final hour of preparation, the purpose of the mossy cradle reached its ultimate climax. The mossy cradle offers up its peace, a final, concentrated dose of spiritual sustenance, offered not as a permanent dwelling, but as a necessary inoculation. It was a quiet blessing for the distant fray, the inevitable psychological battle against doubt, the physical struggle against gravity and fatigue, and the profound emotional challenge of total solitude. This peace was not the cessation of struggle, but the final profound preparation for it. The forest extended a final comfort before labors cease, an embrace of cool, damp air and soft earth before she traded it for the raw, exposed, abrasive stone of the high peaks. Elara understood that the moment had arrived. The window had shown her the trajectory, the map had defined the precise route, and the mossy cradle had charged her core with foundational peace and self-knowledge. She was ready to cross the final, most poignant boundary, and she must leave the innocence of day. The innocence here was the luxury of observation and preparation, the comfort of the protected sanctuary. The ascent would mark her forceful entry into the difficult, unforgiving reality where every decision had consequence, where mistakes were costly, and where the hero's journey truly began. She rose from the moss, the earthy scent of damp humus and deep shade clinging to her like a final sacred cloak. turning her back on the gentle sanctuary to face the demanding, unyielding world waiting just beyond the forest's edge.